'Twas a cold winter's night, and without any heat, I wore Bombas socks so they'd warm up my feet. Yay, my feet cried, these socks are the best. So cushy and warm, I can finally rest. But don't rest, I said, there's more, if you please. Bombas also makes underwear, slippers, and tees. And for each thing you purchase, they donate one new to someone who needs it, so they're cozy too. Everybody deserves to feel good all the time, so gift Bombas this season. That's the end of this rhyme. Go to bombas.com/audio and use code AUDIO for 20% off your first purchase.
Welcome to episode 216 of Sports Management Podcast. Today's guest is Danny Davis, founder and CEO of Recon Sports, a platform helping college football teams use data and AI to build smarter rosters and develop elite athletes. We spoke about the use of athlete data in sports, the risks of operating in college sports, how military experience shaped his entrepreneurial mindset, the mindset shift from army officer to entrepreneur, how he invested 10,000 hours to master his craft, and much more. Danny Davis, welcome to Sports Management Podcast.
Marcus, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. You are the founder and CEO of Recon Sports, driving transformative growth and innovation in athlete data analytics and roster decision-making. So quite interesting. So can you tell us a little bit more about your company?
Sure. Like I said, I'm the founder of Recon Sports. What we do is we help mainly college football teams right now evaluate, develop, and predict the best rosters possible. We do that. We created a proprietary system and software that allows them to sync every data point within their organization. Right now, they have so much data, whether that be from GPSs and data that they're paying for or data that they're collecting in-house, but it all lives in these little silos. And what we do is we're able to synchronize all of that and then make custom models, tailored reports for the programs to now allow them to communicate and analyze the data and not have to put it all together.
Interesting. You say roster decision-making. Is it also, can it be used for scouting purposes, or is it only like within your roster, or what are the capabilities of these systems?
Yep. So it's both internally and externally. So you think internally, they have a lot more data points on their internal roster than they do on their external roster. So when it comes to internally, it's more about looking at how, when a 3-star athlete gets here, what do we need to do to develop him to be a 5-star? So here's our development process, what they're looking in internally. But when it comes externally, it's now how do we go find them? What are some of the metrics that, everyone can spot the 5 stars, but it's about spotting those 3 stars that are going to develop into 5 stars and develop into SEC All-Americans. So it's all about the evaluation process and finding out what works in your roster to then go find what you need to go, what are you actually looking for? And what is that avatar almost in every position? These guys have, when you look at it, probably 13, 14 different positions. All of those positions can look vastly different. So now you're recruiting 14 different people and not just football players, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned there are a lot of data points. So what are, the different data points? Speed, precision, strength, like what are the data points?
Yeah, great question. So I like to categorize it into 2 different categories for the data points. The first is what they're purchasing for the data. So for example, they'll purchase GPSs, and that's tracking speed, velocity, acceleration. They have these cameras on the weight room that's in front of the bar rack. So when they're doing hand cleans, it shows them how fast they're moving the bar. From cognitive assessments to now on-field performance and actually tracking X's and O's on the field. Now they spend a lot of money to collect all of that, but it kind of lives in those different platforms. And then when you look at the other category, data being captured in-house, that's like custom metrics that they're filling out. Maybe if they have like a late system, if he's late, or an attendance system, or just measurements, or something that's easy to track. They have all of these different metrics now living just in their Excel or their OneDrive that's maybe custom to that program. And then all of that is now blended together. So we're looking at quite literally hundreds of different metrics, maybe even thousands if you really got granular with it, from every single aspect, whether it be the weight room, the speed, on-field, cognition, you name it, they're tracking it.
Yeah. So with Recon Sports, like when you're doing a startup, usually you want to solve a problem, right? So in your case, it is to synthesize data more to have everything in one place. Was that the gap in the market that you saw?
Yeah, so I actually started Recon Sports by helping high school football teams call the best plays on third down, and I did that for about 3 years. That's where we started, and I started this while I was in the Army. I went to West Point, played football there, and I wanted to be involved in data, be involved in sports again, and that's how I started the high school side. Once I got out of the Army and stepped into this full time and wanted to pivot to colleges, I noticed that the gap was not necessarily about calling the best plays on third down, but having the best players on third down. And a lot of teams could not figure out how to synchronize all of this without having to go hire a full-time data team. If you look at the NFL right now, you're going to see like 3 or 4 engineers on every single one of their staff directories just for football. You go look at some of the top colleges, you're going to see no engineers. Why? Because that costs a lot of money in salaries and time and whatnot. So that was definitely the gap in the market that I saw. And I was ready because I did all of that with high school and knew the data process now, I was able to fill that gap quite quickly.
I understand. So now, like, how was the go-to-market strategy? You said you started with like more or less one team, and then it scaled. Was it, were you reaching out? Were someone, word of mouth? How was that process?
There's definitely a process, especially being a almost at-home entrepreneur, if you will, a YouTube entrepreneur. You figure out what doesn't work a lot more than you figure out what works. So on the high school process, it was definitely just almost cold call, cold email, getting on podcasts. And my first college team actually saw me on a podcast, and they found me for this opportunity, this gap in the market, because they couldn't find anyone to solve it. So it was almost, I don't want to say luck of the draw. I was in the right place at the right time and ready for the opportunity. And but now as I'm trying to get it into more schools, that's $1 million question that you just asked there, right? How do you get into it? Even if the users like it, there's a whole chain of command and funding now in schools. So it's definitely been a process, and the go-to-market strategy has been fluid and figuring out what works and what doesn't. But yeah, that first one was just really getting out there and getting my name out there, showing my ability, and being ready for the opportunity when they called.
Interesting. So, what has been the biggest challenge so far in scaling this company?
The biggest challenge is, you know, it, it's easy to feel good about maybe being a rock star and being able to do all of this stuff and do the development. But like you said, how do you scale that? How do I scale myself? I can't, there's only one of me. I can't do this 100 times or be in 100 different places at once. And, a lot of it is what I bring to the table and being able to hear what they're saying and know exactly what they want from a data perspective. So how do I scale that is a great question. What I've been doing recently is actually providing courses and one-on-one coaching for directors to teach them how to do it. And it's become very valuable, and it feels really good to do, honestly, because I'm showing them a lifelong skill, and they're going to be able to do this now even without me and show up to a staff meeting with certain reports that they built and that their coaches are looking at like, wait, where'd you get that? Oh, I made that. So I'm almost starting to maybe scale in a way that I'm just opening up my library and helping coaches and directors almost do it themselves while then still providing that, elite service of doing it for you. That's going to be harder to scale. But it's definitely a challenge. But I'll say one of the really good things about how I've been doing it is I control all of the development. So my development costs are very low, and that allows me to have a lot of flexibility with what I do because I'm not having to almost pay for the product. My time's valuable, but I don't necessarily have to pay for the product while I figure out how to scale and while still maintaining my current customer base.
Yeah, that's an interesting angle. And yeah, you mentioned product development and technology is ever evolving, right? So how are you maintaining, agility in product development with, keeping up with the fast pace that is technology?
Yeah, we're in an interesting spot right now, for sure, with the technology and AI. And I say it's almost interesting because I don't think it can do what they're necessarily marketing yet. Like the chat GBTs, the AIs in general, they hallucinate, especially when it comes to calculations. They're really not there yet, but it's coming. It's coming, and it's about being ready for it. I think the next big wave is the digital twin technology, where if you have all of this data, all of this data now, and you're able to create a digital twin of your athletes and run simulations like that, that's definitely what we're gearing up towards. But in terms of AI right now, how I'm at least utilizing it and how the Recon team is, we're almost utilizing it to make ourselves that much more efficient. And our standard operations and maybe just documentation or certain ideas we're using it for. But it's almost like be almost superhuman with what we can provide to our customer base, because they don't necessarily want just an AI bot, especially when it's not there yet. But it's something that I think in the next few years, the space of college football and data is going to look very different. And it's definitely about figuring out how to position ourselves for that moment rather than maybe today, is how I look at it.
Yeah. So do you see AI, machine learning, and computer vision as something that might compete with what you do, or is it something that you can use within your technology as well?
Definitely used within our technology for sure. And you think about, you know, in order to utilize AI and do everything that you just said, you're going to need all of your data in one place. So just getting it in one place is half the battle. To where if you had to build an AI that goes into all of these, 50 different data sources, compiles them, cleans them, and now you're able to put into a large language model. If we have that and now we're able to put that into a digital twin technology, I think it's going to be you can't do it without it. I'll say that. So unless you have a system that can compile every metric within your organization into one place and then plug it into a large language model and utilize the AI, I don't think you're going to be able to do it, at least not in the near future, because it's just not going to be that good yet.
Yeah. I would agree with that. And, talking about managing risks is ever evolving. Sports markets can be, it's seasonal and, there are budget constraints, especially maybe in this educational system. You mentioned it before, they don't have the budget to have an engineer like they do in the NFL. So is that something you see as a risk to your business?
Big time. Big time. And it's definitely, I don't see myself being in the sports world for forever. It's kind of like my niche right now. I want to almost be really good at that and get a solid base with it to then expand into the other verticals of the data world, not just being sports. But, you ask anyone at any big organization, everyone has the problem where they have all this data and all these systems and they don't talk to each other. So it's really about, I want to solve that problem long term, but being in the sports space is definitely, I think risky is a fair word, because like you said, the budget's ever moving. The Penn State coach just got fired. They paid him $56 million to fire him. Now I'm sure their entire product line and what they're doing is going to change with the next group that comes in. And on top of that, there's a lot of other sports, but the other sports don't necessarily have the budgets that, some of the high revenue producing ones do, like football or men's basketball or maybe even basketball. So navigating that is definitely a challenge, and a unique challenge. But I think that could be anywhere. If you were to go to the DoD space, try to get into DoD contracts or defense, you're going to be in the same battle. I think with maybe private organizations, you're still going to have to do a level of education and they're going to have budgets. So while the process of how I go about it might be different, I think the problem is going to be there no matter what vehicle or vertical that you want to go into.
Mhm. So where do you see the potential, except for sports? Could it be in, as you said, like in the military or in the healthcare system or in, in private businesses?
Yeah, so actually right now I have something called Recon Digits. It's not being advertised or anything yet. It's just allows me to do it in different verticals. And I work with an aerospace company right now that has everything to do with we're talking about athlete performance. Now we're talking about employee performance and what are they hitting their planning goals? Are they hitting their overall strategic goals? What does it look like? They have all of these different programs, and you look at some of the top level executives now in charge of this data and in charge of presenting it. They have the same problem. They don't have a staff of data engineers, or they're not set up for this. So now they're having to do it themselves, figure out Excel, figure out this, compile it. And then they do all of that work. And what's crazy is it just kind of vanishes because they can't reuse it. It doesn't refresh. It's not a living report. So I've noticed it in the aerospace, but I think everything from different just organizations, like I said, that have these data points and have these that have the constraint of they can't go hire multiple engineers, but want to have a different solution can really be any vertical that uses data, in my opinion.
Hmm. So now in your company, is it you, just you, or do you have employees as well?
I have employees as well and strategic advisors, and I've almost set up my company to be like a practitioner or a doctor's office, if you will, to where I do all of the development. And, I'm the lead on that. I almost have my company set up to where everything else, I almost have employees to focus on that. So where I can focus on the high level development and making sure that my time is being maximized while not having to do maybe 10, 15, $20 an hour tasks. I have all of that taken care of. And then some of my strategic stuff, my long-term planning, stuff that I just don't know about running a business or high-level technologies, outlooks. I have advisors that help work with me and coach me through that. And what does my long-term plan look like? And then being able to zero in, have all of my day-to-day kind of taken care of. And I can just, make really big moves or really big actions rather than just 100 small actions. It's kind of how I have it set up.
Mm. No, I like that. And then it seems like you are not micromanaging, right? You are focusing on what you need to do, and then you hire the right people to do the other tasks that needs to be done.
Yes, exactly. How do I scale that way? Great question. But, I like learning about the models of like high-end watches or high-end purses or high-end products that it's almost like kind of small mom and pop shops, and they don't sell to everyone, but they keep their product and value very high, and they know how to do the system, and they love doing it. They like making those watches. They like making that type of, whatever they create. Maybe this is what I do with that, and maybe if I was to mentor just a couple data engineers to help take it and being able to utilize AI to maybe even possibly even replicate some of the stuff that I'm doing maybe in the next 5 to 10 years. Um, I'm not overly concerned with scaling right now, to be honest with you. I'm more so, I just want to maximize my knowledge, maximize the value that I'm providing. Love what I'm doing. I absolutely love this stuff. It's such a blessing and a blast to be able to wake up and do this every day. So that's almost what I'm focused on right now. But I realize that the scaling piece is going to be necessary. Um, and I think with technology and just analyzing the market, keeping going how we're going, I think I'll definitely figure it out. But that's kind of the boat that I'm in right now.
No, that's an interesting take on it. You have an interesting background. You're a data systems engineer turned CEO. Also, you said also graduated from West Point, so served as an army officer before you started with this venture. So, how do you feel like your military training has helped you in starting your own company and being a CEO?
It's helped me tremendously. Going to West Point, I didn't learn any of this stuff at West Point. I learned the systems maybe a little bit and the leadership. Definitely not the business side, but what I walked away when I graduated from West Point that day really taught me, and I realized that I can do anything that I put my mind to. I can go out and figure anything that I want to. And it was like, okay, now that I know this, I can almost take full control of what I want to do. the goal was never to maybe make my own company. It was I had to spend 5 years in the military, and it was what am I going to do after that? I want to do something in data. I want to do something in sports. I'm just going to start taking classes. So for 5 years, I had a 9 to 5 job, but then I worked on Recon Sports from 5 p.m. to 9 p.m. almost every day. And having that knowledge and then seeing the value and just taking one step at a time, it morphed into a company. But having that foundation of being able to know that I can figure anything out, any problem out, I can figure it out one way or another. It's almost like a double-edged sword because knowing that, it's all your fault if it doesn't happen or if it doesn't work or you don't take a chance. But on the other side, you know that if you do and if you're persistent and you have the perseverance through it, you're going to be able to figure it out. And I'd say that's the biggest thing that I take with me from my military experience.
Anything in terms of your leadership that now when you're managing employees?
For sure. For sure. And it's a little bit, there's definitely a lot of micromanaging that goes on in the Army, and it's a different atmosphere and a different environment. So having to pivot to more so like what we're doing now in Recon Sports, and I don't want to be that micromanager. I want to get the good people and almost bring visions to life. I would say I'd learn a lot more on how not to do things. And that's just because this isn't the civilian world looks very different than the military. But also now like being able to make sure that I still have that human aspect when running a business. It's easy to kind of get into just like the kind of cutthroat and performance is the only thing. To run the military, you need to take care of people and you need to take care of your soldiers and know that if their home life, if their outside the office life is not going well, that's going to directly impact what they're doing inside the office or out in the field. So that definitely taught me a lot. And now having my own employees, making sure that I still have that human pulse check and not just like a boss check or just a performance check, or I'm only looking at metrics of success and not looking at them as human beings and making sure that I'm there as a leader and not just a boss.
Yeah, I like that. So obviously the military is a very disciplined environment, right? And startup life, it needs discipline, but not every day is the same. It's new challenges that appear. So what is the biggest mindset shift that you had to make from being in the army versus being an entrepreneur?
Biggest mindset shift I had to make was not being motivated. I'm sure there's a better way to say this, but not being motivated by punishment. If I wasn't at a workout or wasn't at something, I was going to be punished. So that's being in that culture for 10 years, you become motivated by not having negative consequences. Now, getting into the real world and the entrepreneur world, no one's going to come yelling at me if I don't get up in the morning. No one's going to write me up for not doing a certain thing. So the amount of discipline that I need to have with myself now really needed to skyrocket. And because no one was going to yell at me for not doing anything, I needed to make sure that I was, in a sense, yelling at myself for not doing things and holding myself to that daily high standard, what I wanted to do. That was definitely the biggest shift. I remember like the first couple months that I was out was very strange because it was like, wow, now I can wake up whenever I want to. Like, what time do I kind of wake up? What time I get to choose what time I wake up now? Like, do I want to be an early riser? Do I want to get up at 8? Like, just that couple months of like, it was kind of weird. And it might sound kind of like, wow, what time are you waking up? But it's like after being there for 10 years where I had no choice what time I was waking up, it was definitely different.
Yeah. It sounds a little bit like an athlete as well, that when you're an athlete, someone tells you where you need to be, when to eat, when to go up, when to practice. And post-career, a lot of athletes are struggling with that to, take charge of their own life and what to do and having that type of discipline.
For sure. For sure. And you see that a lot. And now with, in the college football world with NIL, these college athletes are getting paid a lot of money and being able to set themselves up for success once they leave that organization is huge, and they have the money to do it, and they can kind of step into a world that they dictate. And what's really cool about being in this space is the player development at these colleges are through the roof. They're tracking everything, not just on football, but their entire life to make sure that they are set up for success once they leave that organization. I was talking to one player development guy the other day. It was like we had 5 guys get drafted this year, but I had 25 guys go out into the real world. I want to make sure that I'm confident in those 25 guys going out into the real world, that they are set up for success. They're young men of character, and they're going to be able to make that transition into real life.
Yeah. No, that's definitely a challenge for, as you said, both in the military, but also in the world of sports for sure. So, we have talked a little bit about your background with the data and systems engineer, but going way back, when did this interest for data start? When did the sports interest start? And how has your journey been up until this point?
So my dad was always really good with Excel growing up, and maybe I kind of took after that, or I was able through college, like when I had to do different projects, I could always call him and he would help me through it. And then I would always just like I would be my own, I'd make my own little personal finance book, and I enjoyed doing that. So there was always this intuitive passion for it. And then obviously with sports, playing football all of my life, getting recruited to be to go to West Point and play there. I knew that I wanted to be back around it. And the first summer after I graduated West Point, I was home for 2 months. I went and volunteered at my alma mater high school, and I was with them for the entire summer, for 2 months of summer. So with their summer training and then their summer camp, and just being around that, it was like I want to have this still. I want to make sure that when I leave the Army, because being in the Army, you definitely get that sort of bond, that chemistry, that atmosphere. But I wanted to make sure that I didn't want to go to the corporate world. I wanted to be involved somewhere in sports and data. And I think I just used my passion to kind of drive that. And when I had this vision of wanting to maybe start a company or do my own thing, I looked at it as, it takes 10,000 hours to master something. And at the time, I had about 4.5 years to put in 10,000 hours. And doing the math back then, it was about 8 hours a day that I would have to put in to make sure that when I left the Army, I was an expert in this. So I did not hit 8 hours a day for 4 years, but I came damn close, and probably like 4 hours a day at least, maybe even some on weekends. And then bringing on advisors, bringing on, even investing my own money into help in courses and bringing on someone to teach me, just all of that. And it never really felt like work. It never felt like I was going home and had to do something. That's what I was looking forward to doing while I was at work all day, to be honest with you. And even at work, I was being an Army officer, you're in charge of maybe $4 million worth of equipment at a time. And they literally give you this binder this thick of just papers of all the equipment that you're in charge of, equaling $4 million. Now you're in charge of $4 million worth of equipment with this binder, and just all of in these containers worth of equipment that's being used, going to the field, you're signing out to people. And it's just a manual process, to say the least. And I built my own data system just for that, my own internal management inventory, who I was signing it out to. Like, so all of this, I looked at it as an opportunity to apply my passion to certain problems that I was experiencing and then wanting to be in football. And it just, that constant for 5 years led me to really be a subject matter expert without having to necessarily lean on the college experience to learn all of this stuff. I literally learned through self-teaching, but also putting myself to have hands-on experience through certain projects or things that I was hunting down. And not just maybe from an academic standpoint where you just learn it textbook format. I really got to learn it by applying it.
In chasing these 10,000 hours, was it always in your mind that you wanted to be an entrepreneur and start your own? Or was there also a thought that, you would be a master in this and then take a job at a sports data company?
I think my first thought was to be an employee somewhere, whether that be a team, a sports data company. I just wanted to have the knowledge and have the value to where I can go do that. And then once I started getting high schools calling me, being able to sign certain schools, and then learning about how to start a business and bringing on advisors and realizing the opportunity that and advantages that come with owning your own business and being your own boss and having that sort of lifestyle. Once I started to learn what that was, because I never knew what it was growing up. I didn't even really know you're not taught that in public high school. I'm from upstate New York. You never were taught that. At West Point, you're not there to be an entrepreneur. You're there to be trained into an Army officer. So you're not really taught entrepreneurship then. But once I started to learn about it and talk to people that were entrepreneurs and start getting mentored and coaching, it was like, I really want to seize this opportunity. And it was one of those things where being in the Army really helped me to where I didn't necessarily have to like if I would have waited when I left the Army to now jump into it, I'd be working in corporate America right now. I really took advantage of the security that I had as being an Army officer in terms of a paycheck and the time that I had, because I had to serve 5 years. I really utilized that time to, once I got out, it was no question for me to jump 2 feet in. Like, I had put in the work, I had the vision, like I was ready, and I was able to jump and be ready for an opportunity. If I didn't do all of that or didn't go through just the learning process of this, I wouldn't be here today having this conversation.
Hmm. You mentioned mentors. So how did you find them? Was that someone that you reached out to actively, or was it someone you already knew, or how was that process?
Um, Both. Some family members some aunts and uncles that I have that are very successful entrepreneurs. One of my roommates at West Point, I was telling him about my idea. His uncle was a venture capitalist who helped me through some of the business and operation stuff for a long time. Certain West Point grads, my dad went to West Point. His classmates would mentor me through this, and we'd meet once a week and talk about the business side, the sales side. So I was constantly looking to have conversations, constantly seeking mentors, seeking advisors, and maybe if not from the standpoint of, hey, I want you to be my mentor for the next year. We meet every week. But hey, an hour of mentorship with me and you on the phone right now, I was able to extract so much knowledge from those conversations to then now go apply them into my life, is how I went about finding those at all levels.
What is the biggest thing that you feel like they have helped you with?
Time compression, being able to not have to figure everything out myself or realize being able to see some of the mistakes before going through them has been huge. And also, when we talk about going through universities and now the contracts that are involved and making sure legally I'm set up right and making sure legally I'm presenting myself professionally, a lot of advisement on how to put those contracts together, how to make a statement of work, how to actually go about the procurement of it. Having all of that knowledge for an hour on Zoom, once a month, once a week, it's just invaluable, like quite literally invaluable.
Yeah, I've talked a lot about that on this podcast, to have mentors as specifically when you're young and up and coming in the industry, but also for some positions, there are coaches for CEOs, there are coaches, for different positions, and you can always learn something from someone who has done what you have done or have similar experience.
Big time. And I think that's almost one of the major things that I think younger people miss out on or don't realize how to do, especially when you graduate college and you're, say, 22 years old. I think from 22 to maybe 30, you really need to invest in yourself. And that looks a lot different for a lot of people. And we're not really taught on how to invest into ourselves. But I think one of the first things is investing, even if you got to pay this person or sign up for one of their courses or something like that, investing in a mentor to help you along a process is like one of the best things that you can do in your 20s, not for your life, but especially in your 20s, to figure out what you want to do in your 30s and not just kind of go into a system. I wish that in school they taught that a little bit more and how to follow your passion, but also invest into your passion, invest into yourself, become more valuable. And there's nothing wrong with the corporate life, but you still need to invest in yourself if you're going through a corporate ladder because you're competing with everyone else climbing that ladder. And if you can bring value that they can't, that's how you advance and get paid more and go up that ladder that much faster. And having those mentors for the time compression, I think it's very underrated. And, people might ask, how do I find one? Where do I look? It's kind of just like being a good human being and maybe just calling and asking for help and being honest and being a little bit vulnerable. And once you do that enough times around the right people, people want to help you, especially for people that have done it, they want to help, the previous generation or the next generation. Definitely an important thing if you're going to start your own business or you just want to be ultimately successful throughout your entire life.
Yeah. And it's never been easier to connect with someone, right? You have LinkedIn, you have
Yes.
the internet. So, you can just send an email or send a message on LinkedIn. And the worst thing that can happen is you get a no or they don't get back to you. And it takes you a couple of minutes to write it down. But apart from that, you have nothing to lose, right?
Exactly. And with LinkedIn, you can go literally filter all of the people that maybe went to your alma mater or went to your dad's alma mater or, sir, you don't want to just want to reach out randomly, but hey, what are some points of commonality that I can find? I can literally go and filter that on LinkedIn and then kind of have a little bit of a personalized message. Hey, we went to the same school. I'm looking for advice in this. Can we have a 45-minute conversation where I just ask questions? Now, I think a big portion of that mentorship is realizing that they're not just going to give you the answers, or you're not going to show up to a call and they're just going to hand you a magic booklet and be like, this is what you need to do. You need to know the questions to ask and then know how to put those answers into action. That's very crucial. And because if you just show up and it's like, okay, Marcus, what should I do in my business? How do I be successful? No mentor out there is going to be able to help that. But if I came to you with strategic questions, I'm thinking about it, I'm working it. Hey, how do I make a podcast? I'm having a hard time here. Have you experienced that? That's how you maximize mentorship right there.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. So, in your career, has there been any bumps on the road? And if so, how did you overcome them?
It's tough hearing no a lot. I would say every time that you're being in a sales position and you're told no, it's almost like a small bump in the road, and some can be bigger than others. And I've realized that really, whenever you're hearing no, has nothing to do with them and everything to do with you. So every bump in the road, it's really analyzing and looking at myself in the mirror, my actions, my strategy. Something's wrong with the strategy, right? It's being able to separate the vision from the strategy. If I want to go do something and I want to sell data analytics and change lives that way, but I'm communicating it one way, but someone's not really listening to it or doesn't see the value in it, I need to adjust my strategy of how I'm communicating it. How am I going about articulating the problem? There's something wrong with my system and process, and any bump in the road that I look at and really reevaluate. And also, I looked at, from a sales perspective and being told no a lot, being in a military environment, being in an athlete environment, you're heavily driven off of performance. And you feel really good and you're in a good headspace if you're performing well. And the same goes from an entrepreneurship. So it was almost like I needed to untie my relationship with like performance and success because not performance, I'm going to get wins and losses all the time. Those losses can't define how I value success or how I persevere through or how I look at a situation. I would say it's like almost a bunch of micro bumps in the road. I don't know if I've had one big one yet, at least, which probably means I'm not making enough noise. But I've had a bunch of like little micro ones that having that confidence, having that reflection, having those strategic partners and advisors, I'm able to navigate pretty confidently.
That's good to hear. And I mean, there will always be small bumps. And you mentioned the no's. It's every no is one step closer to a yes, right? So at some point, it depends on how you look at things as well.
For sure. For sure. And you look at so many things of, Thomas Edison making the light bulb. How many times did he fail making the light bulb? And, he literally said something like he found 240 something ways on how not to build a light bulb, right? So he could have quit after any one of those or just given up, but he went back to the drawing board, back to the engineering room, and figured it out. And that's just kind of the mindset that you need to have.
For people listening that might want to do a similar journey as you or get into the sports industry, what is some advice that you would give them?
You definitely need to learn a skill, and you need to be an expert in that skill, no matter what it is, if it's technology, marketing, engineering, coaching, consulting. You need to have a lot of value in one skill to where you can either now use that skill to invest in your own company, just like I'm doing right now. I took my skill of data engineering and software, and I'm investing that skill into my company. Or now I can, if I really wanted to, I could take this skill and go to another data company and say, hey, this is the value that I provide. This is my skill set. I'm a subject matter expert in this. And it's tough because that's being a subject matter expert does not happen over time or happen quickly. It definitely happens over a long period of time. So just almost finding something that you're passionate in, that you're able to stick through to develop that skill to now, if you want to go be an entrepreneur, great. If you want to go work for a company and be a W-2 worker and have, do that job set, great. But it gives you the option now. If you don't have a skill, if you don't have a certain skill set, there's not a lot of options for you to choose from. And you're almost dictated now by the market, or you're dictated now by your boss and not through your own value, or you don't really have control over your vision. So I would definitely say you need to learn a skill set and be very proficient and very effective in that skill set, no matter what it might be.
Yeah, I like that. It's a good one. It's because it's always the like generalist versus specialist discussion, right? But at least you say that you should have one skill that you're really proficient at.
Yeah. And if you're gonna you see a lot of times people that are really good conversationalists that aren't entrepreneurs might be like, oh, I'm a great salesman, or just because I can talk, have great conversations, I can go sell something. That is not the case. There's almost like a certain language to selling products that we're not really taught. I think that one of the skills that you need to have is being able to sell and negotiate, not just products, but you're selling and negotiating every day in your life, even if you don't notice it. And being able to, it's almost like problem solving. It's not a conversation, it's a problem set. When you go and you present, you try to find a problem, here's a solution for it, here's why you should have it. It has nothing to do with how good I can ask you how your day is going or have a friendship. But if you can go sell something and then provide a skill behind that, you can open a lot of doors for yourself and not have to be that reliant on other people.
Exactly. I like to end on a networking question. So who from your network do you think would be a good guest on this show?
I love throwing Travis Taylor's name out there. He's the player development director for the University of Tennessee, and he provides a great perspective on college athletes today and that development piece of he's big on transition. So when they get to the university, what's that transition? When they leave the university, what's that transition? I think it's very powerful because it shows that we all need to have a transition in life. I think he would be a really good one. And then there's a couple reaching out to like certain of the companies out there that have started this, like maybe Perch, Catapult, Elite Form, having them come on and share their journey through the entrepreneurship and maybe zero in on their one metric that they provide and the technology side, I think would be really cool.
Yeah, definitely. Good tips right there.
Yeah.
Danny, thank you so much for taking the time to be on Sports Management Podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. This has been a great conversation, and best of luck to you in the podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Sports Management Podcast. Please hit the follow or subscribe button on your podcast app so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. If you want to get in contact with me, send an email to sportsmpodcast@gmail.com, connect with me on LinkedIn, or follow the podcast on Instagram, X, and Facebook at SportsM Podcast.